All right, welcome to the Growth Marketing Podcast, your go-to guide for scaling e-commerce brands to 7, 8, and 9 figures, hosted by Brick Social Zone, Toby here, and me, Tony Does Ads. We're here to reveal the strategies and secrets behind the success of top brands. Get ready for actual insights and growth hacks to take your business to the next level. Let's start scaling. Toby, what are we touching on today?
I think we've decided on chatting about onboarding, right? Client onboarding from the very first touch point all the way to ultimately being a client of ours and commencing with work. So I think it's a question that we get asked a lot pre-clients working with us, like what does your onboarding process look like? And I think it's somewhere that a lot of agencies do inefficiently and can really ruin a relationship and set it off on the bad foot, on the wrong foot, whether it be just a clunky, insufficient process or whether it be like just bad expectations being set. So it can either set you up for success or failure. And I think that's a good thing for us to talk through how we do it and why our clients praise us for it.
Exactly. I think communication can fall off. You can have people wanting to start work, and you might have an agency say, yeah, we can get you in 4 weeks or 8 weeks or something. Like, I think we try to move a bit fast, which is nice because we know the pains that people have had. But yeah, let's just get into kind of that whole process of what it looks like. Maybe you can start with your end of things, because it's sort of like Toby works on a lot of the front end, and then once we get kind of the agreement rolling and the audit rolling, I kind of take over. So yeah, if you want to talk about sort of the initial stages, what does that look like?
So yeah, let's go right back to the beginning. Like, brands come to us from all different directions, whether that be referrals, inbound. So depending on where they come from will determine the initial steps, but typically we just hop on an initial introductory call. And that call by no means is a sales call. It's simply an opportunity for myself and the brand to get to know one another and for us to determine whether they would be a good fit. So we would dive into some nitty-gritty details, understand why we're on the call in the first place, what problems they're having, and then at that point I'll have a pretty good idea of whether we might be able to help. It's also a good opportunity for us to have just a vibe check, like, are we on the same page? Do we get along? Would they be a good fit for our agency? Because this far into our kind of agency journey, you can determine that pretty early on based on historical partnerships. But yeah, that call typically takes about half an hour, and we deep dive into goals, ambitions, metrics, past problems, hurdles they're facing, what they're looking for in a team and an agency, and then I reciprocate that. I tell them what we're looking for in a brand and a partnership. And then the best thing for us to do from that point is, if they are seemingly a good fit, is for us to determine whether we can actually help them. So we then request access to their ad accounts, depending on which we're looking to audit. That could just be Facebook or Facebook and Google and creative and the website. And that is purely an opportunity for us to get to know their brand in a bit more detail, whether we can actually help them. So I've talked about their goals, but let's look at their data, their conversion rate, their average order values, all those sorts of things. And do they match up? Do they marry up? Do we feel like we could do that for them? So we gain permission to their ad accounts, and then we typically set an expectation of about 2 to 3 days of us conducting an audit. So we deep dive into their ad accounts, conduct a very comprehensive but bespoke audit of their Facebook, Google ad accounts, provide suggestions on how they're running things, how we would suggest things based on what we're seeing work currently. And we tie that all into the conversation that I had on the phone call. It's not just generic recommendations. It's, okay, well, this is what you suggested that you want to achieve and the problems you're having. Here's what we'd recommend based on that. Also, it's worth noting at this point, if we go into the ad account and we realize they're doing everything that we would, like, there's nothing we can really suggest here, or ultimately we don't think we could achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve, it's within our interest to be brutally honest there. So we'd feed that back also and hopefully provide them with some tips, but maybe kind of end the conversation there. If we feel like we can, we'll provide context to that within the audit. And within the same audit, we'll do a deep dive into their website and their creative, site speed, all pretty holistic, and provide suggestions there. We go through our process, our kind of introduction to our team and our values and everything along those lines. So then I send that to the prospect, and then I give them kind of 24 hours or so to digest that information. And then depending on how technical though that secondary call is going to be, it'll either be just me or you as well, where we hop on that secondary call and we talk through our audit findings and then basically discuss any questions they have. And typically those questions are quite technical based on the audit that we presented, but it depends on the DNA of the person we're talking to. So like, are they a technical person, founder? If they're not, typically it's more around like our processes. If they are, it's more around like nerdy data stuff, which you can kind of you can take over and talk about wherever. If it's about like processes and communication and stuff, we can. So we've got the first call, the audit, the secondary call, And then at that point, we typically leave the ball in their court and say, look, based on this information we've provided, how would you like to proceed? And what questions do you have? Most of the time, if we're a good fit and we've presented a good case, we'll then agree to partner, and we'll get our onboarding process kicked off. We've spent many years refining our onboarding process to make sure that it's as seamless as possible and as pain-free as possible. It doesn't take days, it takes hours, and it's done through a 5-step process, which we have a website which they visit, and it's personalized to them, and it says 5 stages for them to get onboarded. So it's integrations, which is the most nuts and bolts kind of annoying thing, because Facebook and Google don't make it easy, but that's the first stage. The next stage is agreements. Third stage is fact-finding questionnaires. Fourth stage is getting their kickoff call booked in. And the 5th stage is kind of just expectations on what they can expect. So once that's all been complete, our client success manager will reach out to them to book a kickoff call. That can be anywhere from the following week or whenever that kind of final call lines up. It can be a couple of days after that initial call. And that kickoff call is ultimately where we all get together, our team and theirs, and is when we officially take over the reins of their account and start our research phase, which I can hand over to you. But we then set the expectations of what we're going to be working on. We really deep dive into numbers and metrics, our initial plan of action, what they can expect from every facet of our partnership. And then after that call, that's when we're partners with their account and we start running. But as soon as we put down the phone to that kickoff call, that's when our team starts researching, optimizing their account. And that's kind of when you take over the partnership at this point. Whereas before, although it's collaborative, I'm primarily driving that and making sure that they're happy and feel comfortable and they're actually a good fit and we can actually do what we say we're going to do. So quite a long-winded answer to that kind of initial part of the onboarding, but that's how we kind of find that we can make sure that we're working with the right brands as well as making them feel as comfortable about the process as possible. But I'll hand it over to you. Phone call has been complete, the initial kickoff call has been complete. What does the team do to ensure we get kind of hit the ground running?
Yeah, and I think the main thing on that kickoff call too is we've already got all those kind of fact finder questionnaire answers. But then we want to go to that kickoff call and just make sure we're still aligned on maybe the goals that they wrote in that form. Things might change. They might have a new product coming out or something, and I go, I want to push this direction or whatever it might be. Despite it's usually a pretty short window between the 2 times there, but it might change, or they might decide, we want to just look for new customers and whatnot. We can kind of go over that in that kickoff call. So yeah, from there, we'll go over and kind of show them what the next steps in research process looks like. A lot of that is, we're pulling competitors that you shared in that fact finder questionnaire. We're looking at what they're doing. What's the market looking like? We're pulling a lot of your review data. We're going into Facebook and Google, and we've already done sort of an audit, but we're going in even deeper now and seeing what's worked in the past, what hasn't, what have they tried, what haven't they? And then we're pulling all this review research and seeing what are the demographics. Do that actually line up? Does that match with maybe what you put in that fact finder questionnaire, which is always interesting to see. Sometimes it matches. Sometimes it can be a little off, which is always interesting. So we even share your site copy might need to be updated a little bit just to be more in line with what we're seeing people say they love about your products or whatever. So that's always really cool. So yeah, on that kickoff call, we go over those steps, really diving into the research. From there, and after that kickoff call as well, we might kill off any ads that we just see are just losing money for the brand. But it can be pretty light in that first week or so because we're really diving into the research. We do have sort of a fast track route though too. Some brands just want us to start testing right away, and we kind of have things we can do, and initial kind of hypotheses that we can make and run pretty quickly. But a lot of times I do prefer to dive into research, figure out everything we can, meet as a team internally, and that's sort of the next step after that research is done, is we kind of do an internal kind of a research game plan call. So we have our senior media buyer for Facebook, we have our senior media buyer for Google, we have our creative strategists. They all kind of go down the rabbit holes of here's what we should do on Facebook, here's what we should do on Google, here's the creative we need, here's what we're seeing competitors do. And we bring that all together based on all this research that we're doing and come up with a game plan. So what is the biggest levers that we can go in and test right away? And what's the initial hypothesis that we have, and what can we test kind of in that first kind of structure build out that we run? That's a lot of our research. It's really diving deep. I always say just going down the rabbit hole, and I mean really going down the rabbit hole. If I'm doing it on Facebook or Instagram, I'm clicking on all your competitors' ads and products and adding things to cart, seeing what other competitors are popping up, and then I'm adding those to our competitor research sheet. And I'm really diving deep into the rabbit hole. So from there, boom, we go. We have that internal game plan research kind of sync call with everyone. And then from there, we'll meet with brand, which would be you in this case. And we share all this with you. We share kind of our worksheets. we put it together in a nice slide deck, and we kind of go through, here's what we're seeing, like even like desktop versus mobile use, male versus female breakdown of purchasers, things like that as well. But then we'll dive into that competitor data, that review data, and share all that with you. On that call too, we usually already have our initial structures all built out. So we're kind of running through, here's what we're seeing, here's what we want to initially start with testing. And then we kind of, after that research call with the brand, we go live on the ads and the initial test that we want to launch. Again, some brands have kind of a fast track. They want us to push things right away. We can get that done. But a lot of times we'll do this pretty comprehensive research, and then we'll meet with the brand, go over what we found, and kind of push it live from there.
So how long would you say the time period is between the kickoff call and the secondary like research call with the client?
It can range. If it does, I would say the longest is usually 2 weeks, but we just did one. It was probably in like 6 days. You know, like we can be pretty quick with it. It really depends on like the brand and what they want to do, how fast they might want to move. We might find, you know, things in the ad account are already looking pretty good. We'll kill off kind of things that are not looking as great. They might have some creative. We'll launch some new stuff for them, but we still, like I said, really like to finish up most of that research, but it is pretty quick. I would say, you know, on average 1 to 2 weeks, probably usually one. So it's pretty quick because we do kind of, like I said, segment it out. So our Facebook guy is diving in there, Google's diving in there, creative strategist is diving in. And with that too, I didn't really touch, we do kind of the site speed optimization and ramp up your site speed. And then we'll get into a pretty comprehensive site audit as well, where we'll push a lot of these research findings kind of over there too and see what we can find. So it's a big holistic approach to everything. So we're not really guessing on these initial like tests that we want to launch with brands. It's like we get in, we get all your questions answered from you. What are your competitors? We gather all that data, we run with it, we dive deep down that rabbit hole, come together, share our findings internally, meet with the client, share those findings again with you. And then from there, here's where we're going next. Let's do it. We kind of get all aligned as a team and with the brand. And then, we push forward from there. But it's usually pretty quick, a week to 2 weeks, which is, I think really fast, honestly, in the agency space, I would say.
And I think the example you just gave, like the brand where we did it in 6 days, we've worked with that brand before, but this is a new brand for them. So there was very little kind of data to dig into. It was a pretty fresh brand, and they're a very, very unique product with, I would say, borderline almost no comparative products on the market. So of course we did as much research as we can. We did the CRO audit and we did the site speed optimization. But whereas a brand that's been trading for 10 years, has got a lot of competitors, there's a lot more to dive into. So we were able to speed up that process without kind of risking the quality of the research. But we've just shared their CRO audit and their speed optimization and made their new theme live just off the last week. So we can be pretty swift with it.
Yeah, and it can be one of those processes too that is reoccurring as well. Like we do all this initial research and it kind of gives us what are the big levers that we can test right away. But then we might have a brand that, they have a new product coming in the pipeline and maybe they haven't even offered that before. So we can go out and redo a lot of research for competitor data. What can we find out there? What can we scrape from Amazon or whatever, and kind of dive into the rabbit hole even further. We also, like, speaking of rabbit hole, we also have some brands that have like Facebook groups, or they have like Discord channels or Slack channels of community members, or the initial people that have bought their products that might be in this alpha beta tester group or whatever. We can dive into that too, and oftentimes we do. And again, it comes back to like, how do we reverse engineer the reasons why people are passionate about the product and the brand? How do we reverse engineer that just from pulling that data, right, and then running with it? So I think one of my favorite parts of media buying, like just really diving into that research, because again, we're not guessing then in that initial stage. It's really finding the leverage.
Piece you mentioned about like the community, diving into the community is really interesting, because you really can see like some people to an extent when they're writing a review don't typically write how they usually would write. They almost like formalize it or like fluff it up a little bit. Whereas if they're just discussing with other purchasers in a Discord group, they can be themselves typically. So you can find some really nice ways that how people describe your product and what questions they have. So it's a really interesting insight if a brand does have like a community of any sort to really dig into that language and what the people are kind of talking about. So it's very valuable. For sure. Yeah,
it's like I said, it's really my favorite part. I think it's some of our team's favorite part. The other members of our team are probably like, this is a lot, but it needs to be, I would say. And I've heard other agencies do things like this. Some agencies I've heard don't do much research, and they're again more of that throwing the fly or throwing everything at the wall kind of thing. And this really guides everything again. So we're not really guessing. It's like, hey, we're going to run with this because we see 80% of your customers are mentioning this is why they love your product or why they bought. So we can kind of run with that And sometimes you might not see it match up 100%. Like sometimes we might see the number one reason people bought or the number one benefit people mention might not resonate with an ad. And it might be the number two thing, but that's kind of where we get into kind of those big levers in testing things initially that we'll see what works.
With some agencies, they say, well, we'll get your ads live tomorrow, whatever it might be. And I think that's doable to an extent, but it'll be somewhat generic based on what's working. It won't be based on a huge amount of research, as opposed to something that takes time to really dive into the research and have like an informed strategy, and to kind of like not go off on too much of a tangent from onboarding, because research is a whole different topic.
Yeah,
like,
I know. I already went
in
there.
itself, part of our process when we onboard a brand, but as like a client experience perspective, like we try to make it, we almost treat like moving agency like moving a house for a brand.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do it very often. And when you do, you want to make sure that it's the right choice and you're going to be there for a long time. We want to make sure that process is as seamless, as confidence building as possible, and as transparent as possible. We don't want to leave you in the dark. So we make sure that we're available during that period of time and make sure that you feel like you've made the right decision. So it's a pretty streamlined process, and we're there every step of the way to make sure that it is kind of pain-free. There are some nuts and bolts which need figuring out, but that's just part of it. So yeah, it's an evolving process for us, and we're always open to feedback, and we ask our clients every time we onboard a new brand for feedback on our onboarding process so we can make tweaks to it based on their feedback. So I don't think we need to go into any more detail than that, to be honest with you. I think if we do, we're going off on a tangent into the other topics. Maybe we'll talk on another cast about research and what that looks like for when we onboard new brands. But I think onboarding, we've kind of explained our process pretty well.
Yeah, and kind of along the way too, I think what's really nice is we'll have our CSM just kind of be there. If you have any questions kind of along the way, she's kind of there to guide you on the directions that we're going. If you have questions, and we try to over communicate again in these initial stages, so you know where we're at with all of this research and where you're at with kind of the onboarding process. Even if like, oh, you gave us the wrong integration access or the wrong permission level or something like that, we kind of try to work with you on all of that. And then we have a lot of looms, like we've really revamped a lot of that process to add looms on everything. So if you're lost, most of the time we have a loom that's like, here, watch this, and then this is, click this, drag this, whatever. So it's very much pretty seamless, which is great. I think that's it. That's our onboarding process. Any final words?
No, onboarding gets me excited though.
Yeah, we got some more ones coming on, so I'm excited to get going. I'm
like refined tirelessly over the years, and I'm really proud of our onboarding process, and we get really good feedback from it. So no, it's something that I genuinely do enjoy talking about, and I have to talk about. Most people talk about or ask me what our onboarding process looks like before coming on board. So, and rightly so, because it can be a disaster.
All right. Well, that's the Growth Marketing Podcast for you. That's our onboarding process. If you have any questions, need guidance through any of this, feel free to reach out to us. We'll see you. Have a good one.